Hey everybody. For some of you, it actually may be hard to believe it, but it has been 5 years. 5 years since the Cube Computer MidTower Deluxe has undergone a major hardware upgrade. Yeah, 5 years. In those 5 years, I have upgraded the storage. I've given it, I've given it more hard disk space. And I think I upgraded the RAM from 12 gigs to 16 gigs. But other than that, the motherboard, the CPU, the video card have remained the same since 2012. The machine currently has an AMD FX 8120 8-core. The first generation 8-core, by the way, the Zambezi Bulldozer. Normally a 3.1 gig processor. I got it overclocked to 4.1. It used to hold 4.2 stable, but as this hardware has aged, it no longer holds the 4.2 gigahertz overclock stable, so I had to downclock it to 4.1 gig. Motherboard in it is actually an AMD, no, I'm sorry, not AMD, but yeah, AMD motherboard, but ASRock 890FX Deluxe 4. It is an 800 series chipset board. So let's go ahead and talk about this particular hardware setup. Why I chose an 800 series motherboard over a 900 series motherboard. The motherboard that's in here is actually an AM3 motherboard that so happens to be compatible with the new Bulldozer processors at the time with the BIOS update. When I bought this motherboard, I had to use my old Phenom 2 965 to actually flash the BIOS to the latest revision so I can install my new CPU. The reason why I kept that particular, the reason why I went with a 890FX series with chipset was because of one thing right here. The floppy disk drive. Yep, the iconic floppy disk drive that has been on the MidTower Deluxe since it was built in 2007. Now, I rarely ever use the floppy disk drive, but this case, the front bezel, the floppy disk cover is permanently molded into the plastic. It can't be removed. Now I could probably take a Dremel to that and cut it out, but it wouldn't look 100% perfect. I mean, I could cut that out and I could stick the card reader in its place, but I no longer have the original bezel that went in the spot where the card reader is at now. So that was one reason why I went with an old motherboard, because the 900 series chipsets, that was the first. Those were the first motherboards out, at least on the AMD platform, that you would notice that there was no floppy disk drive header. So I went with an older motherboard just for this freaking floppy disk drive. There's the motherboard, 890FX Deluxe 4. It's been a decent motherboard, but also a crappy motherboard too. There have been times where you would try to power on this machine or restart it and it would just not post. And you would have to hit the reset button or the power button to get it to actually post. It's been like this since it was brand new. However, this machine stays on almost all the time, so it never really was a problem for me. Video card is an XFX AMD Radeon, I think it's a 6700 series Radeon HD. The fan on that video card failed within, I think, the first month or two that I had this card, and I posted the video to YouTube, and everybody was like, "Oh, how dusty that is!" I mean, I can't remember exactly how long it was since it was first installed and the fan fell, but it wasn't a very long amount of time. And people blamed on the amount of dust that was in the machine. Now, you can see the machine does have a little bit of dust in it now, but it's because it's been over a year since I cleaned it. But at the old place, dust was a big problem. However, so what I did, which the fan that was on this video card originally was a piece of crap. It was really cheaply made, and it was actually made by Cooler Master, go figure, and it was actually horribly made. The fan blades were real cheap and flimsy. The whole thing was just a piece of crap. So, since it happened to be a 60mm fan, I just took a Delta ball, I think it's a ball bearing Delta fan off of an AMD Athlon XP heatsink fan assembly. Took the fan motor and the motor and fan blade itself out of the original square framing, and hot glued it to the heatsink on this video card. It's been that way for 5 years. Fan still works just fine. The power supply, the power supply that was in here, it failed in 2013. It was the Case Gears Eco Element 650 watt, one of those, off-brand power supplies that I got out of a machine back in, I think, 2010. It was actually out of a parts computer, but it actually was a pretty decent power supply. I mean, I opened it up, and the part that failed was actually the 5-volt standby switching regulator IC. But the power supply itself, although it was kind of low end, it was actually pretty decently built. It wasn't like a real cheap end unit either. So I bought this Thermaltake Smart M750W power supply, and you may be able to see the little 5-year warranty thing on the side of it. 80 plus bronze, 750 watt supply. It's funny, next January the warranty will expire on that thing. It's been there for, this coming January will be 5 years of service out of that power supply. Nearly constant on use. On the motherboard, let's see, roughly a year or two ago, sorry about the shaking there, the little fan that is actually over the VRM heatsink, that one failed. And it's a wonder it didn't smoke and actually burn up. I mean, literally, it was, when I took it out, when I shut the machine down and actually unbolted the fan, the motor was so hot you could smell it. So this fan I have on there now that actually has LED lighting in it came off of some clip-on RAM heatsink that I got from the parts computer way back when. So that's roughly a little story behind the hardware that's in here now. I'm planning on upgrading this to an AMD Ryzen 7 series system. And you may ask, why let's go and go all the way, go with the Threadripper setup. For what I use this machine for, I don't really think it's necessary. I don't want something that really draws a lot of power. I think the Ryzen 7 would be plenty for my use. I don't game with this. I primarily just do video editing, which, the Threadripper would probably help there, but I think the Ryzen 7 would be perfectly fine for that kind of use. So I'm planning on going with the Ryzen 7, of course, socket AM4, that particular platform. Though there's going to be a few obstacles I'm going to get around first to do this upgrade. However, they're not going to be too tricky. Okay, so all this time I had been planning on just doing away with the floppy disk drive with this upgrade, but if there was any way possible that I could avoid it, that would be great. So, there it is. As I mentioned, I don't use the floppy drive on this thing much at all, but this has been with this machine since I was ever built. It'd just be funny for somebody to walk in and look at this computer and have all this brand new hardware, but had the floppy disk drive still in there. It's always been a funny thing about this machine. Upon searching on eBay, I have finally found the little gadget I've been looking for all these years. It is a floppy to USB adapter. It plugs into a traditional 1.44 megabyte floppy drive, and it essentially runs off of a USB port. The only thing about this is this thing is like $20, and it would take probably over a month to get here out of Hong Kong. I saw a video from V West's wife of him using one of these in a Dell machine. Now, what's interesting here is it looks like this thing actually gets its power off the USB port, and you see this little connector there that goes from the little PCB to your floppy drive to give it power. This makes me think, seriously, that this is just the internal guts of a USB external floppy disk drive. Now, I know not all of them are actually like this. However, I do think there are some out there, probably older ones, that were built like this, that just had a traditional internal floppy disk drive inside of a case with this little guy in the back. You see, this cable that's on there is just your typical external USB cable. You plug it into a USB port, for goodness sakes. And you can see here, there you go, you can see where it just plugs into, where not plugs in, but it's soldered into the PCB there. So before I actually buy one of those things, before I go out and blow out $20 something just to keep the floppy disk drive in MidTower Deluxe, I've got an older external USB floppy disk drive that I'm going to open up just to see what's in there. See, perhaps something like this is in there. Otherwise, I'll be buying this to keep that iconic floppy disk drive in MidTower Deluxe. Okay, so that's one obstacle. Now for another obstacle. When AMD released the Socket AM4 platform, they redone the way that the cooler attaches to the system. Now, for those of you guys who happen to use air coolers, that's not a problem. As you look carefully here, you can see that although the brackets on the board are different, the hooks are still there and they're still in the same spot. This is something with AMD that hasn't changed since the days of Socket 754. Yeah, over 10 years. You could still theoretically use a cooler from a Socket 754 motherboard on a brand new processor. Now, I wouldn't recommend that in a case if it's like a stock cooler. Now, if you have some real high-end cooler from way back when, like a humongous heat pipe cooler that was paired up with your Socket 939 or 940 or 754 system back then, theoretically that would still work on a brand new system using AM4. But for those of you who, like myself, who happen to use water cooling, that's a bit of a problem here. As you can see, the holes on the motherboard are not in the same spot they always used to be. For Socket 8, they were in the same spot from Socket AM2 through Socket AM3 Plus, but with Socket AM4 they've been relocated. Have a look at this. The green dots are Socket AM3. The red dots are Socket AM4. You can see only a minor shift, but still, it's a change. And I think it's kind of crazy that they've done this, really. So what I've done here is I've made myself a little printout. Let me grab my flashlight so you can see this better. What I did is I made a printout. And it's kind of hard to see the red dots. Well, yeah, the red dots because I printed out with my laser printer. But again, what I'm going to do is see, I used this AM3 bracket just to make sure that it was actually fully lined up, and it is. The thing here is, let's take a look here at the machine. The water block I installed, of course, I bought it back in 2012. And of course, AM4 was not around in them days. Now, the company that makes this water block, which is a brand known as Watercool, this is the Heat Cooler 3.0 LC water block, and they do happen to make a retrofit bracket for this water block for the Heat Cooler 3.0. But this company is not in the United States, and I haven't been able to find a seller who sells this retrofit bracket in the United States. So ordering wood would be a little tricky. So what I'm going to do is when I go to upgrade this machine, and I may actually do this before I do the upgrade. I may actually, since I need to service this water cooling system anyway, the MidTower Deluxe may actually go back to air cooling for a brief little while. I don't know for sure. I'll decide on that later. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this block out of there, disassemble it to get the bracket loose, and I'm going to actually drill the new holes. Since when you look carefully here, although they will be kind of close to the side, it shouldn't be a problem. I should be able to tap the new holes through the bracket and mount this to an AM4 motherboard. Now let's go and talk about the water cooling system in general. In case you haven't been subscribed to the Cube Computer channel all that long, this water cooling system was put on the MidTower Deluxe back in 2010. Part of it is pieces from a Thermaltake Big Water 735 liquid cooling system. I got it off of a part system back in, again, 2010. The radiator is what was originally an automotive AC evaporator. It never was actually used as an evaporator. I found this in my grandpa's shop with the plastic cover still on. The plastic covers were actually still on the ends over here. These, you can see the little bolts on the end where it would otherwise get hooked into your AC lines on your car. Now I have no idea what kind of car this went to, because most evaporators look a lot different than this. However, see this big thing, the lines in it are copper, which is a good thing considering the rest of the fittings in the system are either brass or copper. You never want to mix aluminum with copper in a water cooling system, or aluminum with any other metal for that matter. Now back in 2010, when I was running the AMD Phenom 2 965 on the MSI board, I was using the actual Thermaltake Big Water 735 water block, which was actually fabricated to fit onto an LGA 775 Intel. However, I made it work with an adapter that was actually made by Enzotech, probably for one of their blocks, but it worked. I have it somewhere around here. So I used that adapter to actually make that thing work. Although I was never really impressed with its performance, which is why I got this heat cure block. So again, if I didn't mention already, the reservoir and the water pump are both from the original Big Water 735 water cooling system. I have no idea how old these parts are, but like I mentioned, I got these in 2010. They came off of an Intel. They came out of a parts machine that was a high-end Intel LGA 775 system. So we're probably talking 10-year-old components here. I have no idea how many hours were on this pump when I had got it, but this pump has been on near constantly since 2010, because this machine runs nearly constantly. I don't know exactly what the rated hours of this thing are, but there is your information. Get a good focus. Kind of hard to do this with one finger. So it's the Thermaltake P400 water pump, 900 milliamp at 12 volts. Water flow, let's see, 400 liters per hour, plus or minus 50. Water lift, 2.10 meters. So that pump has not had any problems at all with this big, humongous loop. And this thing, this loop being this large, does take a considerable amount of coolant. Now the coolant that's in here is Fluid XP Plus, and it is a little low. I have noticed over time, like over years, the level gets low. I had to top it off one time with some distilled water, but one thing I've noticed, and this was back in 2010, was, see, my dad had brazed these connections from. He brazed some barbs onto these fittings that went to this Well, these weren't the actual ones that went to the evaporator core. He just happened to have these. And I've noticed, let's see, back in 2010 I had a leak issue with the bottommost one. That's why it has all that gunk on there. I gunked it up with some RTV and it's been fine for all these years. Though I noticed what looked to be a little bitty wet spot there. I don't know if that's just from the glue. Well, not glue, but the RTV. But this thing might have been losing just a hair bit of coolant over that little spot over the years. So I'm going to investigate that. I've leak checked this thing multiple times and not had any leaks in it, at least inside the machine or anything like that. So now here's an interesting thing. I've heard there's a little bit of controversy over Fluid XP Plus, so let me go and give you my opinions on it. Now I have not had any leaks, sprung inside the system, but this coolant has never been changed. I kid you not, it has never been changed since 2010. When I changed out the block, I didn't change the coolant. I continued using the same coolant. Now, do I recommend that? Not necessarily. I've heard intervals of 1 year or 2 years and things like that. That you should flush out your system every so often. However, I've been kind of lazy with that. It's been running the same coolant for all these years. Now that coolant actually still looks very good. And that might be why this pump is still working as good as it does. As long as you never run your pump dry, you should be fine. I've heard these water pumps can last for a considerable amount of time. It has not made any odd sounds or anything of that nature. It's barely even warm to the touch. So I'll go ahead and I'll take the cap off of this. I took it off earlier. And I've noticed that it can be really tough to get off there sometimes. Okay, I've removed the cap. And I do not have any issues with stuff growing inside there. This would be a common problem that you would have if you use like regular water inside there, like tap water, which I don't recommend using tap water by any means. Distilled water is a good option. Matter of fact, that's what I topped this off with, was distilled, because 100% pure water is actually not conductive. It's the minerals and stuff that's in the water that makes it conductive. Let's have a look inside the reservoir, and you can see down inside there. Now, what's interesting about this Fluid XP Plus is it's actually marketed as orange. Now, let's see, get you a better view here. Now, from an angle like this, it does look yellowish orange. It has that. It's had the same color ever since it was new. But under like cold cathode lighting, it actually lights up more of a green color. Now, it actually did used to light up a more. It actually used to be a bit more green than it is now, probably just due to the age of the coolant. But this stuff has lasted a long time. I have to say, it's definitely been in there quite a while. Now, I am going to flush this out and change out the coolant when I upgrade the system. The only other thing about this coolant is it does do what people say it does. It does happen to stain your lines. I noticed this when I was changing out the water block years ago. I noticed that the vinyl tubing had a yellowish tint to it when I drained down the system. It had a yellowish tint to it. So it does happen. It does that, in fact, stain the tubing. Now, what's fun about this tubing is it's nothing special. It's just your basic tubing from Lowe's. Yeah, I think it's the Watts brand, whatever brand that stuff is at Lowe's. It's been working fine all these years, but considering this tubing is now 7 years old, I'm definitely going to be changing it out. So it's going to be flushing out the system, and I'm going to be replacing all the lines because they are definitely getting old. They're still good and soft and everything, but you know, when they get this old, you definitely want to change them out because the last thing you want to do is have your line fracture. Okay, so now the two other minor obstacles I'm going to end up running into with this upgrade are, if you look carefully inside here, well, you may be able to see. You're not able to see better on the back of the machine. As you see those telephone lines going into the back. And you're thinking, oh, surely you're not on dial-up, are you, Nick? No, I don't use dial-up. However, I do, once in a while, I do use faxing. I do have to fax stuff out once in a while. I haven't had to do it in over a year. I used to have to do the faxing a lot more, primarily faxing stuff from my parents. But, as you may know, one technology that just absolutely refuses to die is sending stuff via fax. Yeah. To this day, people still fax stuff. So, you have to keep this old ancient technology around, and I don't have a fax machine. However, what I can do when I upgrade this machine, since the PCI slot is a thing of the past, I'm talking about the traditional PCI slot, is somewhere I do have a PCI Express modem card that I have to stick in here. Worst case scenario, I have to buy one, but you know, no big deal. And the final obstacle would be these faceplates for the DVD burner and DVD-ROM drive. Of course, as you may tell, these came off of an A-Machine's computer. The topmost drive is still an actual drive from an A-Machine system. The bottommost drive, the faceplate, is from A-Machines. However, the drive is not, because I had to replace the drive a while back. When it comes to these drives, and this is what I ran into when I upgraded the Black Max back in 2013 to its AMD APU setup, because of course that motherboard didn't have IDE hookups, so it was all SATA, which is not a bad thing by any means. But on that machine, I had to find specific drives that were the same brand as the ones that were in the machine at the time that were from the E-Machine system. See, the thing is, these faceplates are usually brand specific. If it's made by LG, it'll generally work with most of the LG drives. Or if it's made by Samsung or HL Data Storage, you know, just for example, you have to sort of look for drives that do match up. And I already have multiple SATA DVD-ROM, not ROM, but DVD burner drives, and one, I do happen to have one SATA DVD-ROM drive available, so I'm going to see if those will work with these faceplates or any other E-Machine faceplates I have, because ever since the MidTower Deluxe was built 10 years ago, back in 2007, it has used the E-Machine style faceplates. So anyways, I know this video is kind of all over the place, and my flashlight is going dead. But that is just a little overview of some of the obstacles I'm going to face, and some history of the hardware in this machine, at least as far as the water cooling system goes, and the current hardware. But yeah, I do plan on upgrading this machine here in the next probably month or two. It's about time, really, because I mean, 5 years is a long time when it comes to technology, how far things come, how far stuff evolves. So although this machine still does have a good bit of power to it, it is quite dated, I have to say. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Hey everybody, I sure hope you guys enjoyed this video from Cube Computer Channel. Remember to like the video, subscribe to Cube Computer Channel for more updates, and remember to tick the bell so that you actually get notified of these updates. Did you know that I am also on a second channel that's Cube Computer MTDX? Over there you'll find videos of bicycling, weather, elevators, and all sorts of other neat and interesting stuff. Feel free to subscribe to that channel as well. And again, I thank you for your support, and thanks for watching this video.